Hey everybody, I am KMO, host of the Sea Realm podcast, the long-running though infrequently produced Sea Realm podcast. The Sea Realm Vault podcast, which is behind the paywall, gets produced more often, but not as many people hear it. Funny that. Also, Gebb, G-E-B-B, Gebb.io is a webcomic which is now in print. It isn't actually possible to order the print versions of the comic just yet, but it will be soon. But it is possible to buy it on Amazon.com for either Kindle or Comixology. Just go there and type in Gebb Comic. You will find it. If you would order it, that would help me out a bunch. Also, over here, other camera. Day after tomorrow, I will be interviewing Ben Burgess again. First time this year. Ben writes for Zero Books. He also appears on Rising from time to time. He writes for Jacobin, and he teaches philosophy. He's definitely a leftist. He is totally on the left, but you don't have to be a right-wing nut job to understand that cancel culture is dumb. It's counterproductive to the goals of the left. And as Ben argues in the book, and I think he makes a pretty good case for it, really it's a symptom. You might say it's a pathology of powerlessness. You know, the left eats itself. It picks on its own members. It forms up the circular firing squad because its members don't really have much intuitive belief that they could actually change anything significant. All they can really do is perform virtuosity, virtuosity, or not virtuosity, I suppose, moral virtuosity. They can make public performances of moral virtue for one another. And the most exciting way to do that is to pick one of the litter and rip him to pieces, or her, as the case may be, or they, or them, or, whatever. Hikane says, did we ever get your thoughts on Godzilla vs. Kong? Okay, yes. You think you did, but I'll say them again. It's pretty, it's fun, it's dumb as a bag of rocks, it has big-ass plot holes in it, but I enjoyed it. I watched it twice. And when the plot holes came around, I was like, nah, I don't hear you. I liked it. A lot of the human characters, completely unnecessary, but, big lizard, big monkey punching and blowing fire and all that stuff, it's expensive. Much cheaper to put actors in front of cameras and have them go jabber jabber for a little while to fill time, and then, save the big special effects extravaganzas for those, those climactic moments. It provided what I was wanting from it. That's all I'll say. What else? Computer, wake up. Worst of the trilogy, in my opinion, says Hikane, least amount of big monsters. I'd say the first one had the least amount of big monsters. The second one definitely was replete with big monsters. This one provided us big monsters in the daytime, which, if you remember, like going back to the 90s, the Roland Emmerich version of Godzilla, we only ever got to see the monster at night. And if you look at it now, I mean, the CG is pretty dated. Will today's CG look dated in 5 years? I don't know. I don't think it's a universal. Like, if you look back at Walking with Dinosaurs, which was a BBC documentary from the 90s, that still looks great. I mean, you can see the limitations they were struggling against, but the lighting, the atmospheric perspective, the animation, it all looks amazing. And it's very well integrated into a photographed background. Jurassic Park, I mean, you can see it. It's not flawless. It hasn't aged perfectly, but it's aged well. I mean, it's like Brad Pitt. I mean, yeah, he's older, but he still looks great. So, anything else? Questions? Hit me with questions. I don't think we have people in the chat yet. All right. Well, I'll talk about what you saw on screen here. Let's put it back up on screen. There you go. 1 day, 21 hours, 56 minutes, and 1 second until my first NFTs drop. And I'm not making them at all. This is the grand thing about all this. I struggled trying to make NFTs, and then once I thought I had the process down, I realized, man, making them with Ethereum is crazy expensive. They wanted like $80 to $100 to mint one NFT. And then somebody wrote to me and they said, hey, KMO, you should check out Cardano. It's a lot cheaper. And minting NFTs should be a lot cheaper. And I went and I did it on one site, and I spent like $9 to mint my first NFT. And then I found another site which had what they call a white glove service. Here, let's see. It's this site right here. CardanoNFTsales.io, or if you type in CardanoArtist.io, it'll take you here. And the header says NFT.atelier. Atelier is a fancy European word for an artist studio. Anyway, they have what they call their white glove service. Where is it? Let's see. Well, somewhere on here. They just talk about their white glove service, which means, man, you the artist. Oh, here we go. Free. For the time being, you can mint your NFTs for free on this site. Available for a limited time only. Seller only needs to cover the space dust. Private payment address for buyer to use, or their traditional listing, they ask for 5%, or this is the white glove service. Projects of all sizes. We don't mint until you're 100% happy with the end product. We will help market your products through all of our social media outlets, consultative services to help you with design planning, sales, strategizing. This is the package that I inquired about. And that day, I got the guy who built this site. His name is John Huffmaker. And we got on a Zoom call, we did screen share, and I just watched him typing up the markup, to create NFTs with my images. And we have decided on a coordinated launch, and that's going to be in one day, 21 hours, 53 minutes, and 40 seconds. And he is advertising, as they say, in various places, social media, building awareness, hopefully building excitement. Because I don't want to sound like a grump here, but I've seen a lot of NFTs that, you look at them. I mean, I've seen some cool ones. For sure, I've seen some cool ones. But I've seen a lot that it's like, does this need to exist? I mean, clearly you needed an image in order to mint this NFT, and what you really wanted to do was mint an NFT, but the image really just seems, pro forma. It seems like a placeholder. So, what I draw, I mean, not the best artist in the world. I don't imagine that I am by any stretch, but I am doing it for purposes of self-expression, and I am doing it to improve my skills. I also do it for money, but it's a passion. I mean, it's something that I've done since I was a little kid, and I really, now that it's what I do to make money, I procrastinate on it. But it's still something that once an image is finished, if I spend 10, 15 hours, on a comic page, you think 15 hours to do one drawing? No, 15 hours to do 9 drawings. Multiple layers of 9 drawings. I look at it and I just have to smile. It's like, wow, that didn't exist yesterday or 2 days ago. It does now, and I made it, and that's pretty cool. And the fact that I'm going to get some money for it, well, it helps keep the lights on and keep a roof over my head. So, I want to continue to make art. I need it to be viable for me. And what I'm really hoping to do is come up with some sort of system where I can work and travel. Because right now, at home, when I do the comics, I'm using a big 22-inch Cintiq. It is in no way portable. It's barely even nomadic. I mean, it's like a piece of furniture. I can't travel with that. A Wacom Mobile Studio Pro is like $3,500. That's way off in the future, if ever. So I've got this. I've got my Surface Pro. It's got a stylus, but I never, ever draw on this device, on this screen. I mean, I hook this up to the Cintiq and I draw on the big Cintiq, but I need to be able to get to a point where I can use this or an iPad and be traveling and just have a few hours where I can sit down in a hotel room or in a cafe or something and produce some artwork. And I just, the comic, I'm never going to produce just on this. All the Clip Studio Paint, like all the tools and the palettes and the various menus and things, they take up so much screen real estate. There's almost nothing left, to draw on. The iPad is a little better. Programs on this like Fresco are a little better, but I need to figure out something. I need to be able to create images that I can use to create revenue from while traveling. And it's most likely not going to happen with the Geb webcomic. It's too visually intensive for me to work with all of it on a tiny screen and have room to draw. So anyway, I'd say I'm not pimping for Cardano NFT sales, but really I am, because they're pimping for me. So it's a reciprocal agreement. If you want to get into NFTs and you don't want to have to mess with the technical end of things, you're just an artist and you want to try to generate some income from your art, I'd say check this site out and ask them about their white glove service if you don't want to do any of the technical stuff. So, Colin, go back to the laptop here. One thing about Cardano, check this out. Bitcoin, $55,000 per coin. Ugh. I have a laptop at home that I cashed out multiple coins to pay for. It's like a $150,000 laptop. Ethereum, wow, I bought some Ethereum just a few weeks ago. It was like 1,300. Here it is up at 2,600. It's climbing crazy. Cardano, $1.30. Is it going to explode? Well, if it's a lot easier, if it's a lot cheaper, if it is more versatile in creating NFTs and NFTs stay popular, I think it will be going up considerably. So now might be a good time to get some. And rather than just buying some, maybe you could mint some NFTs with some professional help and just get paid in Cardano and then just sit on it for a while and watch it grow. Fingers crossed. That's what I'm hoping for. Still nothing in the chat. This is where I say, is this thing on? I suppose I should be streaming more often. All right, well, what else is going on? Glenn Greenwald. I really enjoy reading his stuff these days. And his most recent piece is about somebody, gosh, what's her name? I forget her name, who just graduated up to a position on CNN. And she's somebody who has just been, a mouthpiece for every unhinged Russia story, Russiagate story. Donald Trump is in Vladimir Putin's pocket. Every story, no matter how, devoid of evidence, no matter how just on the face of it dumb, she has, with a straight face, pimped for the last several years. And, she's been failing upwards, getting journalism wrong at every turn and getting promoted and getting more, exposure, influence, and money at every turn. Let me find that. Let's see. Let's go. Glenn Greenwald. CNN's new reporter, he puts in scare quotes, Natasha Bertrand, is a deranged conspiracy theorist and scandal-plagued CIA propagandist. Here, let me find this over here. Let's go. All right, here we are. Go ahead and throw it up on screen if you would, Colin. CNN's new reporter Natasha Bertrand is a deranged conspiracy theorist and scandal-plagued CIA propagandist. In the U.S. corporate media, the surest way to advance is to loyally spread lies and deceit from the U.S. security state. Bertrand is just the latest example. And here she is with, what's her name? Oh, I've blocked her name out. The MSNBC lady. The most important axiom for understanding how the U.S. corporate media functions is that there is never accountability for those who serve as propagandists for the U.S. security state. The opposite is true. The more aggressively and recklessly you spread CIA narratives or pro-war manipulation, the more rewarded you will be in that world. The classic case is Jeffrey Goldberg, who wrote one of the most deceitful and destructive articles of his generation, a lengthy New Yorker article in May of 2002, right as the propagandistic groundwork for the invasion of Iraq was being laid, that claimed Saddam Hussein had formed an alliance with al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden. In February 2003, on the eve of the invasion of Iraq, NPR host Robert Siegel, you recognize that name, right? Robert Siegel. I've been listening to Robert Siegel for decades. Devoted a long segment to this claim. When he asked Goldberg about a man named Abu Masab al-Zarqawi, Goldberg replied, he is one of several men who might personify a link between Iraq and al-Qaeda. Needless to say, nothing could generate hatred for someone among the American population just 9 months away from the 9/11 attack more than associating them with bin Laden. 5 months after Goldberg's New Yorker article, the U.S. Congress authorized the use of military force to impose regime change on Iraq. 10 months later, the U.S. invaded Iraq, and by September 2003, close to 70% of Americans believed the lie that Saddam had personally participated in the 9/11 attack. Here's a screenshot from that article. So, of course, now Goldberg's reputation must be just in the toilet if he hasn't, been imprisoned for the lies, which helped get the U.S. into a decades-long war that has cost the lives of, hundreds of thousands of Iraqis and thousands of U.S. servicemen and women? Of course not. Back to Glenn Greenwald. Goldberg's fabrication-driven article generated ample celebrity media attention and even prestigious journalism awards. It also led to a great financial reward and career advancement. In 2007, The Atlantic's publisher David Bradley lured Goldberg away from The New Yorker by lavishing him with a huge signing bonus and even sent exotic horses to entertain Goldberg's children. Goldberg is now editor-in-chief of that magazine, and thus one of the most influential figures in media. In other words, the person who wrote what is arguably the most disastrous article of the decade was one most rewarded by the industry, all because he served the aims of the U.S. security state and its war aims. That is how U.S. corporate journalism functions. All right. Not sure I should continue. Let me check the chat. Is anybody there? Hikane's there. Can confirm, watching on Out of My Head YouTube. So, yes, this thing is on. All right, so we'll continue. Another illustrative mascot for this lucrative career path is NBC's national security correspondent, Ken Dilanian. I bet that's it, Dilanian. In 2014, as you can tell, I don't watch any TV news except Rising, and a bit of Al Jazeera, I will admit. In 2014, his own former paper, the Los Angeles Times, acknowledged his collaborative relationship with the CIA. During his stint there, he mimicked false claims from John Brennan's CIA that no innocent people were killed from a 2012 Obama drone strike, only for human rights groups and leaked documents to prove many were. A Freedom of Information request produced documents published by The Intercept in 2015 that showed Delanian submitting his reporting to the CIA for approval in violation of the LA Times' own ethical guidelines, and then repeating what he was told to say. But again, serving the CIA, even with false reporting and unethical behavior, is a career benefit in corporate media, not an impediment, and Delanian rapidly fell upward after these embarrassing revelations. He first went to Associated Press, then to NBC News, where he broadcast numerous false Russiagate scams, including purporting to independently confirm CNN's ultimately retracted bombshell that Donald Trump Jr. obtained advance access to the 2016 WikiLeaks archive. Alrighty, there he is. Doesn't he look happy? Well, his career is going great. Why wouldn't he be happy? On Monday, CNN made clear that this dynamic still drives the corporate media world. The network proudly announced that it had hired Natasha Bertrand away from Politico. In doing so, they added to their stable of former CIA operatives, NSA spies, Pentagon generals, and FBI agents a reporter who has done as much as anyone, if not more so, to advance the scripts of these agencies. Bertrand's career began taking off when, while at Business Insider, she abandoned her obsession with Russia's role in Syria in 2016 in order to monomaniacally fixate on every last conspiracy theory and gossip item that drove the Russiagate fraud during the 2016 campaign and then into the Trump presidency. Each month, Bertrand produced dozens of Russiagate articles for the site that were so unhinged that they made Rachel Maddow, that's whose name I couldn't come up with earlier, look sober, cautious, and reliable. In 2018, it was Jeffrey Goldberg himself, knowing a star CIA propagandist when he sees one, who gave Bertrand her first big break by hiring her away from Business Insider to cover Russiagate for The Atlantic. Shortly thereafter, she joined the queen of Russiagate conspiracies herself by becoming a national security analyst for MSNBC and NBC News. From there, it was on to Politico and now CNN, the ideal, rapid career climb that is the dream of every liberal security state servant calling themselves a journalist. Her final conspiratorial article for The Atlantic before moving to Politico is the perfect illustration of who and what she is. The Trump-Putin relationship as directed by the Kremlin. Why does the White House cede control of the narrative to the Russians? Natasha Bertrand and Anna Nemtsova. All right. I'm not going to continue. Here, let's pop back over to that. All right. So, last week, James Corbett got kicked off of YouTube. He got kicked off for good. Like, all of his videos deleted. He had a backup channel. So I think you can still see him on YouTube. But his main channel has been, it's been kicked off. What did they accuse him of? I'm not sure if it was the same thing that got me banned for a week, disseminating medical misinformation. Who knows? I think they probably just said he was propagating conspiracy theories. It's very interesting. I mean, I've known about James Corbett since, I don't know, like 2008 or so. But, I paid a little bit of attention to him back then. And just, I knew who he was. And I knew that he was definitely on the more respectable end of the conspiracy theory continuum. But I wasn't interested in that continuum at all. So I kind of tuned out for a very long time. And I guess it was, he did an interview with Thaddeus Russell. And I listened to that interview, and Thaddeus Russell starts off, in the intro to the interview, he says, 4 days after we recorded this interview, James Corbett and his entire channel were removed from YouTube. What do you think about that? And then he plays the interview, and James Corbett is, he's very sober. He's not making any wild claims. Mostly what he does is he just reads the public statements, from the from the people who think that they have the right to control the world and to control how you see the world. He's not making anything up. He's putting out different pieces of information, which are, they're verified information, and then suggesting how you should see them as being linked. I guess that's the theorizing part. But he's got a great phrase, which I basically just started listening to him again when he got banned. So of course, being banned from YouTube, for somebody who is as diligent as Corbett is in terms of backing up his material elsewhere and telling his audience again and again, this is coming. I'm going to get kicked off of this platform. You definitely need to know how to find me on these other platforms. I don't do that because I'm just not that organized. But at the same time, if I got kicked off of YouTube, yeah, hundreds of videos that I have uploaded would be gone. But they're mostly just sort of seat-of-the-pants interviews. Not interviews at all. Most of them are not interviews. They're just me jabbering, like I'm doing right now, looking at a camera and running my mouth. And I wouldn't miss them, really. It'd be fun to look back at those things maybe 10 years from now and chuckle at what I was obsessed with and what was clearly going on in the background, but I wasn't seeing it because I was caught up with other nonsense. That might be interesting. But he was really diligent, about making sure that his whole project was not dependent on YouTube. And I definitely want to do the same. But what I wanted to say was, he's got this great phrase. Whenever somebody calls him a conspiracy theorist, he turns around and calls them a coincidence theorist. It's like, oh, all of these things, they just happen to line up in this particular order. They just happen to serve the power structure that exists. There was no collusion involved. There was no behind the scenes comparing of notes and, disseminating of talking points. It's just a coincidence. You're a coincidence theorist, which is more likely. When it looks like there is collusion, when it looks like there is conspiracy, is it more likely that people conspired? Or is it more likely that events just sort of happened that way and to make it look like they conspired? Well, I'm saying this, I'm sort of teeing it up sarcastically, but I think one problem that, one pitfall for most conspiracy theorists, and I don't really see James Corbett falling into this, but I see it all over the place, particularly like in the QAnon sphere, is that people don't understand the idea of emergent behavior in complex systems. Or they don't seem to understand that people have class interests. And if everybody in a particular class is just advancing their own class interests, they are going to do things which give rise to emergent behavior in the system, which looks like coordinated effort, but isn't. But at the same time, we also know that people conspire all the time. Conspiracies happen. So I think, the conspiracies to ignore are the ones which are just really fanciful. The ones that are trying to pull in influences from way too many parties over way too long a period of time. Like, I'm just not concerned about the machinations of the Bavarian Illuminati because I don't think they've existed in the last century. All right. Looking at the chat once more. Anything there? No. Oh, my people, where are you? Hikane asks, what is disinformation and why did the media cling to that as a buzzword instead of falsehoods or lies? That's a great question. I don't know that I have an answer right off the top of my head, but let's rattle it around and see what falls out. Why say disinformation rather than just falsehoods or lies? I wonder what context disinformation most often comes up in. Let's just do the starting, you don't end on Wikipedia, but it's a good place to start. So let's go to Wikipedia and check out disinformation. Is there any difference between disinformation and just a straight up lie? Disinformation is false or misleading information that is spread deliberately to deceive. This is a subset of misinformation. The English word disinformation is a loan translation from the Russian, something that probably sounds like disinformation in Russian, derived from the title of a KGB black propaganda department. Joseph Stalin coined the term, giving it a French-sounding name to claim that it had had a Western origin. Russian use began with the Special Disinformation Office in 1923. Disinformation was defined in the Great Soviet Encyclopedia as false information with the intention to deceive public opinion. Operation Infection was a Soviet disinformation campaign to influence opinion that the U.S. invented AIDS. The U.S. did not actively counter disinformation until 1980, when a fake document reported that the U.S. supported apartheid. The word disinformation did not appear in English dictionaries until the late 1980s. English use increased by 1986 with revelations that the Reagan administration engaged in disinformation against Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. By 1990, it was pervasive in U.S. politics, and by 2001, referred generally to lying and propaganda. All right, well, that's a little bit of information about the history of the word disinformation. It is a deliberately coined term from Russia meant to sound French. But why is it so popular now? He kind of says, so the answer to my question is the implications of Russian propaganda. It definitely, I didn't know this until just a minute ago, but it is certainly tied to the history of Russian intelligence services and, the KGB and manipulation of information and manipulation of the public mind. So perhaps we hear it in the mainstream media a lot because it's meant to evoke images of the KGB or whatever they're called now. They have a different name now, but it's largely the same people. It's the same organization with a new logo, a new masthead. That's interesting, though. I'm going to dig into that more because that's a good question. This is snake juice. I fasted over the weekend, sort of fasted. I started each day with coffee with heavy cream, and I also ate 1 cup of yogurt each day. And that's because, a couple reasons. One, I mix in psyllium husks for fiber. It's good to get some fiber in your system. And also, I take vitamins, supplements in the morning, and I don't like to take those on an empty stomach. But then after, the yogurt, then it's just snake juice. So this is potassium chloride, Himalayan sea salts, baking soda, and the little floaty bits in there are a vitamin C tablet, which I now realize doesn't really break up in water very well. I won't be doing that again. And there's also just a splash of lemon juice concentrate in there. I did that because I was about to break my 10-year weight record. I thought, okay, absolutely have to do some intermittent fasting, and let's start it off with a couple days of hard fasting, or snake fasting, snake diet. Snake diet. It's the guy who shouts at the camera. He says, "Stop eating, fatty!" This is his concoction. But I actually I did eat today, but not in many hours. So I'm doing trying to get back on the fast for 19 hours a day, eat in a 5-hour window each day. If I include my first cup of morning coffee, I was probably in a 6-hour window today. But when I leave here, I'm going to have to walk right past this big tin, which is full of chocolate and candy, and there's also a bag of chocolate donuts just right outside the studio door. But I'm going to muster my resolve, and I'm going to walk right past him. Alrighty. Wow, this is the deadest this chat has ever been. But he kind of confirms that it is working. So, suppose I could tell you a story. What story should I tell? The mask thing is getting ridiculous. I don't necessarily have a new story to tell about people around me wearing masks, except it's the same old story. Like, I'm walking to the store. I walk to the store multiple times a week. It's, I'm outdoors. There's a breeze. The sun is shining. It's not like I'm in a phone booth with somebody. And it's always old people. They're wearing a mask. I'm not. We're about to pass on the sidewalk. They step into the street. It happened again the last time I walked to the store. But then the thing that really gets me is when I see them driving alone in their car wearing a mask. What's that about? I mean, if you think there's somebody hiding in the back seat, you shouldn't get into the car. But if you actually get into the car, you sit down, you put on your seatbelt, you turn the key. I mean, if you're the only one in there, if you think you're the only one in there, who are you? What is that mask protecting you from? Who's it protecting it from? Are you protecting some other person? Is there like an invisible, or is there somebody like crouching down, below the level of the window? Maybe they've got a gun trained on you. That must be happening a lot, because I see people driving alone in their cars wearing masks a lot. It's nuts. It's nuts. And I'm not ready to confront anybody on the street, but my vaccination date is Friday. It's the 30th. And it's the Moderna virus. So it is one of the messenger RNA, experimental viruses or vaccines. I have my reservations. But at the same, here's my dilemma. I tend to be pro-science, really pro-scientific method, not so much pro-scientific community, but I'm still pretty pro-scientific community. I'm not pro-allopathic medicine. So this is kind of a struggle for me. Like, I'm not particularly afraid of the mRNA vaccines. I understand the arguments. Hey, this has never been used. This has never been administered to humans in large quantity before. Not necessarily this particular vaccination, but this whole class of, like James Corbett calls it, experimental genetic therapy. And, to some extent, that's right. That's what it is. And there have been, like thalidomide, there have been popular drugs which were widely prescribed for a long time, and people trusted them and took them, and they had horrific consequences. That could happen with this. But I'm not afraid that that's going to happen. I understand it's a possibility, and I think, if everybody getting vaccinated lets us just get back to something akin to normal life, like you can see people's faces, you don't have to wear a mask when you go into a store, you can gather, there are concerts, there are plays, people regularly gather in restaurants and coffee shops, and just the whole social thing opens up again. If most people getting vaccinated lets us do that, then I'll get vaccinated, fine. But this idea that we're all going to get vaccinated and still have to wear masks, and still have to not gather, and still have to be 6 feet apart at all times, and have all kinds of weird documentation, extra documentation to travel. What's the point of the vaccination then? I'm in no way. Hikane says, masks in cars to stop window licking. I like that. Yes, indeed. That is a benefit of wearing a mask in a car. If you have that compulsive window licking, that takes care of it. Snake juice. Stop eating, fatty. Where was I? Oh, yes. Science. People talk about science as if it's a thing. It's kind of a thing. It's an abstract thing. It's a methodology. It is a means of testing your hypothesis against reality, against experimental data, and telling the rest of the world what you did, how you did it, what results you got, and then they can replicate the experiment and see if they get the same results. I think over time, over long periods of time, this doesn't necessarily reveal the truth. It doesn't provide a window into objective reality, but it creates a model which over time becomes closer and closer to objective reality, particularly in the domains that are of importance to us. Although, not only do we not know, I will never know. Scientists could figure it out pretty conclusively, and I will never understand it, most likely, what dark matter is. Not only do they not know what dark matter is, they don't know if it's like, dark matter comes in packets the size of stars or the size of, the smallest subatomic particle. They don't know. But it seems like, for our understanding of gravity to be consistent with observations of how the heavens move, of how fast galaxies spin and yet still hold together, like in the case of the Milky Way galaxy, it's got to be like 90% or 95% dark matter. And yet there are other galaxies which, their movement suggests that they have no dark matter at all. But that's not people are certainly interested in that. And a lot of money gets spent on telescopes, on the tops of mountains, putting them into orbit, putting them at a Lagrange point. That hasn't happened yet. That's going to be the James Webb Space Telescope. But also they were repurposing the big particle collider at CERN to help answer the question, what is dark matter? And they don't know. But you can wonder about dark matter forever. And it's, what the answer you come up with most likely isn't going to cure cancer. It's not going to keep the lights on. It's not going to create jobs for people. It's not going to help us get along. That's something that can remain in the abstract without any great consequence, as far as I can see from my limited perspective. But I think the things that we're really interested in that affect our quality of life, like what makes people sick? Why do the people around this particular well in London get sick, and why did they stop getting sick when we took the handle off the well? These are very important questions that are important to our lives, and the answers that the scientific method provides to these questions produce better results on the whole than the answers that, religion or superstition or, political doctrine produce. The Soviet Union, in Soviet agriculture, a lot of people starved because, for political purposes, some crackpot pseudoscientific theory got elevated by state power to, official truth. And people had to behave as if it were true when the results clearly indicated it wasn't true. That happens, which is why science and politics need to stay apart, but they don't stay apart very well. But my point being, science, as far as I can tell, produces better results in terms of quality of life, in terms of being able to affect the world in positive ways. It gets better results than competing systems of knowledge. Which brings us around, Hikane says, dark matter in space-time is just sci-fi theories trying to explain things we don't understand. I would take the just out of that sentence. And maybe the sci-fi. Just the sci. Anyway, in terms of results, science seems to do better than competing methodologies. I've been listening to a lot of Curtis Yarvin interviews, and that got started when I heard him on the Thaddeus Russell podcast. Again, unregistered podcast, wrong think on display. New people coming in every week to tell you to articulate a narrative which is unapproved and can get you banned, get you kicked off of YouTube if you say it in the wrong way. Curtis Yarvin is a monarchist. He thinks monarchy is a better form of government than democracy. And I don't know that I don't take a position on that. I don't have any hard, fast opinion on monarchy, but I do think democracy is definitely susceptible to particular failure modes. And the U.S. Congress seems impervious to democracy. Everybody hates Congress as a whole, and yet in each state, people tend to re-elect their particular representative or senator like 80% of the time. Most people in that body are there for decades. So, it's you can throw the bums out every 4 years and nothing changes. You can hate electoral politics. You can hate, politics is supposedly a bad word. The give and take, the deal making, the comparing of the weighing of interests and balancing and whatnot. That's how we get along. But Congress, demonstrably answers to the needs and the imperatives of the wealthiest elements in society and pays no attention. Legislatively, there is no correlation between what the people who elect their congressmen and senators and send them to Washington, D.C. to represent them, there's no correspondence between what those people want and what their elected representatives do in Washington, D.C. What the elected representatives do in Washington, D.C. is serve certain power centers. So the Republicans, they tend to serve the fossil fuel industry, whereas the Democrats tend to serve Silicon Valley. And both parties serve the banking interests and, the speculators and the financial elite. So I think from Curtis Yarvin's perspective, you might say that American democracy works because it's democracy in name only. That we make a big deal, we get really bent out of shape and really worked up when it comes to a presidential election. But presidents they're not kings. They're not God emperors. They have broad powers, particularly when it comes to deploying the military, but they're not gods, but we treat them as if they're gods. And, it's a sham democracy. It's a show democracy. It's performative democracy. And because it is performative, and it is insulated from the stupidity of the people, you don't really have to seduce the people so much. I mean, you can control what choices they have and make sure that whichever choice they make within that limited range, it doesn't matter in terms of the policy that will be enacted, for the most part. So, perhaps electoral democracy is particularly fragile and is a bad form of government, but the sort of performative faux democracy, which the United States has perfected and which, other countries mimic, it's good enough to satisfy people, to make them think that, yes, I've had some hand in creating this structure, therefore it's legitimate. But, Curtis Yarvin would prefer that we have that governments were run more like corporations. You have a bunch of people whose interests are tied up in whether the industry, the project is a success or not, and then you reward them for doing well. And if they're doing poorly, you can replace the CEO. You personally, as a non-stockholder in a company and not on the board, you can't replace them. But there are powerful people, board of directors or high-level investors, with that preferred stock, or, they own a lot of the stock. Those people do have the power to replace a failing CEO. And I think that Curtis Yarvin would say that's a better form of government. How does this relate to science? I mean, science is how I got into this. I think that if I look around the world today and I think, well, where are the best places to live? Where's the best place to be a citizen? They tend to be in places which call themselves democracies, which hold elections, which pay homage and obeisance to the theater of democracy. And the places that don't, China, North Korea, Myanmar right now. I mean, Myanmar has elections and then the military doesn't like the results and they just, they take over. Happens a lot in Thailand too. I think that the places that call themselves democracy, they tend to have better outcomes than the places which just say, hey, we don't care about the will of the people. We, those in authority, make the decisions and the people will accept what we decide or we kill them. The worst case of that right now being North Korea. Given all of the criticisms of democracy which have come from, the very first instances of democracy in ancient Greece and Athens, it is susceptible to plutocracy. It's susceptible to takeover by moneyed interests, but more frighteningly, it is susceptible to demagoguery. If the people are dissatisfied and a pretty talker gets up and inflames people's passions and then points out a scapegoat or starts a war, gets a country into a war because war is the health of the state, the person who can direct its citizens to go and die fighting, the citizens of some other nation, is performing his own power. That's just a demonstration of the leader's power. Hey, first is here, he says. I've already said it. Democracy may be fake, but among the choices which are actually seemingly on offer, I mean, the things that are actually being implemented and practiced right now, it seems to be fake but good, or fake but better than the alternatives. So, but you've heard of the red pill, yes? I mean, first is here, so I'm thinking of the black pill. But let's start with the red pill. It's from the Matrix. Take the blue pill, you believe whatever you want to believe. Whatever comforting illusion you choose, that'll be true for you. Take the red pill, you see things as they really are. Well, Curtis Yarvin was the person who first coined, he borrowed that from the Matrix and coined it for, political purposes. You're red-pilled when you see through the lies of your society, particularly, the leftist worldview, and you see how things really are. And then other people, when they see, the idea is that you take the red pill, you see how things really are, and you gain special powers. This is a popular notion among pickup artists. Things are weird and bad right now between the sexes in the United States and the other countries which seem to emulate the United States, or, which seem to be fellow travelers with the United States. And if you take the red pill, you get women. You do well with women. But if you see how things really are, and you see that they're hopeless, and that even the pickup artists are really living pretty miserable lives, it's really just the really good-looking guys or the guys with a lot of money who are doing well with the women, then you've taken the black pill. So black pill is just nihilism, I think. Colin, are you a black pillar? Shrugs. He shrugs. Curtis Yarvin is currently dispensing the clear pill. And he has supposedly 5 essays on the clear pill, but I don't think he's written them all. But these are on a site called AmericanMind.org. And the clear pill, part 2 of 5, a theory of pervasive error. So the clear pill basically, Curtis Yarvin is better for me in an interview format where he's talking to people conversationally, because in writing, I find his writing dense and needlessly ornate and very, very smug and kind of hard to get at. But as far as I can tell, what he's saying is, here, take this clear pill. You'll be happier. You'll know you've taken it when you decide that you're not a partisan for either major side anymore. And I'm not sure if the gray tribe, I don't know if he even addresses the gray tribe, but he's clearly talking about the blue tribe and the red tribe. The conservatives and the socially avant-garde, or whatever you want to call the blue tribe. Blue tribe is mostly just run-of-the-mill liberal, right? It's the extremes that are the avant-gardists. But if you're a clear pillar, you don't care. You are neutral, and it's an exercise, because most of us are going to gravitate to the red or the blue tribe. I'm particularly frustrated because my friends are mostly blue tribe, and I was certainly blue tribe for most of my youth, through college, I would say. Now I find the idiocy of the red tribe just as idiotic as the idiocy of the blue tribe, but it doesn't bother me as much because it's not as close to me. So, clear pill. Just as a thoroughgoing exercise in controlling your own thought process and your emotional attachments to things, you cultivate indifference, absolute, total neutrality. And I can't say that I can reproduce his prescription for how to achieve that. There's a lot of ways that I can think of that might be useful, but I think for me, just straight up meditation every morning. I use an app, I use Headspace, but that's probably, the most effective, consistent way for me to stay, I don't want to say detached, but prevent myself from getting really caught up. In reading this book, a lot of this book is a recapitulation or a repackaging of that famous essay from 2013. Who was the author? He has since taken his own life. But the essay is Exiting the Vampire Castle. And this is, like I said, from 2013. So, 7 years ago? 8 years ago now? And an essay from the left, from a person who is a Marxist and, just looking at what he called left Twitter and talking about how left Twitter is just such a spiritual drag because first, the format of Twitter is just so short. There's apparently Barbara Ehrenreich. Barbara Ehrenreich, this famous, with decades of history of left activism. Barbara Ehrenreich, the author of Nickeled and Dimed, who, she's an academic, she's well paid, she's a writer. She doesn't need to do any sort of physical toil in order to live her life. But she's interested in the fate and in the lived experience of working people. So in order to just investigate what it's like for people, wage earners, not the professional class, not the salaried class, or the, what do they call it? The PMC, the professional managerial class. She's in it, but she's not so concerned about their fate. She's interested in the fate of unskilled, blue collar working people. And she goes and she just gets a number of blue collar jobs. And she works doing housekeeping in a hotel. I think she worked as a waitress for a while. She works some other job. I mean, she really went and did that work and lived that life in order to get an insight into what it is that as a society we ask of people at the very, very bottom. And it's a lot. And we don't recognize them for their contributions. And we tend to be pretty abusive to them. Like she talked about when she was working, I think it was at a country club, and she was a waitress in the restaurant there, that, she had a locker, and her locker could be searched at any time. Her bag could be searched at any time. She just got treated like a criminal. Why? Because she was low wage. So she has the dedication, to fight for the working class at that level. And yet she said something about American empire in decline in a tweet. And she got dogpiled on by lots of left Twitter folks saying that she's an imperialist, that she's a champion of empire. And then lots of young journalists who weren't around in the 90s when she was doing her work and writing nickel and dimed, they just saw on Twitter that she's an imperialist and she's probably a racist and a bigot and a right-winger, and they just ran with it. They just reported it as if it were fact because it was on Twitter. So Ben Burgess talks a lot about his experience on Twitter and also the history of Twitter and how, the medium lends itself to this sort of attack mode and also this performative virtue mode. How are we doing? I'm about out of time, aren't I? Just figured out what I wanted to talk about. Anyway, I'm going to talk to Ben day after tomorrow. That'll be on not the next C-Realm podcast, but the one after that. I plan to get one out this week and next week. So do check out crealm.com. Or, if you're watching this, most likely you already listened to the C-Realm podcast. But in case I found somebody new, if the YouTube algorithm has, dropped a gram of mercy upon me and said, okay, here's a slight reward for your hundreds and hundreds of hours of YouTube content, we'll bring one or new people on. Do check out my previous interview with Ben Burgess, and then tune in next week for another one. We'll be talking about this stuff. All right. Well, I think I am going to wrap it up here. Thanks to the two people who tuned in. He kind of says I'm a Jesus pill now. I think that is fine. Stick with the Jesus pill. And y'all, I'm not prescribing any particular pills for everybody, just Colin. But I'll talk to you again soon. Stay well.